Good morning, gang. Happy Sunday morning to you. So I got something a little special and a little different today. This video is going to be long, probably hour 15, hour 20 minutes, but I would ask each one of you to listen to it. As we all know, we're in for a world of crap in front of us, okay? And one of the biggest things that I've said, my biggest fear for the longest time, is utter and complete economic collapse. Some of you guys agree with me, some of you guys think differently. Well, yesterday I had the opportunity to meet with Tennessee State Representative Bud Hulsey and Tennessee State Senator Frank Niceley. Also got a chance to meet about a half a dozen of you guys who were also at the same meeting that I was. It was a discussion on CBDC and what Tennessee and some other states are doing to protect us from this. Okay. It was very interesting listening to both gentlemen yesterday. They have been at the forefront of removing the sales tax from buying gold and silver. They are at the forefront of trying to get a state currency backed by gold and silver. They are behind getting the state treasurer for the state to establish a gold depository whereby the state is buying precious metals to protect our currency. They have got into passing a law on where Tennessee homeowners can pay into escrow property tax ahead of time, put money in escrow for it, so that when the Klaus Schwabs of the world, the Joe Bidens of the world decide to destroy the world economy and implement this fantasy of CBDC, Tennesseans at least aren't at risk of losing their property for the lack of paying sales tax because they refuse to participate in this criminal enterprise that is CBDC. Mind you this, when you listen to this, listen to what both gentlemen say. They agree with everything you, me, other prepper channels have said about the control, about the objective, about what can be, what they are trying to do by implementing CBDC. I know some people may say, well, gee, they're politicians. They'll say anything to make you happy. Except these two gentlemen have a track record already proving that they are on our side. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's the uniparty and there's just a bunch of politicians that want to take everything away from the people. Maybe on the federal level, and I'm not going to disagree with 95% of the Congress is like that. On the state level, it may be different. Something that was very interesting is when they talked about the free states, the 26 of them. If you've got some time, if you're driving to church this morning or just want to kick back with a cup of coffee and listen, I'll tell you, this hour will go by a lot faster than you think. Enjoy.
Can I say some prefacing things first? Yes. Thank you so much for having an interest in coming out. We live in different times than we've ever lived before, and it's hard to find truth. It is hard to find truth. I have found, actually, there are three things that always tell the truth. Little children, drunk people, and yoga pants. Frank and I both have been called conspiracy theorists down at the house. And I want you to know there's an advantage to being a conspiracy theorist. I don't have myocarditis. My daughter's here today, and she has a sweatshirt that says Noah was a conspiracy theorist. and then it rained. I'll tell you, Frank, I really appreciate him. He knows way more than I know. I know a thimble full, and he knows a bathtub full. So he'll be explaining the whole things about gold bullion. Central bank digital currency got on the radar a few years ago, and it always has scared me absolutely to death. Because you do understand, when you go to a central bank digital currency, what does that mean? Well, the central bank will probably be the central bank in Boston. And what it means is they will do away with cash. You will have no more cash. In one day, cash will just be a piece of paper that you can start a fire with. It has absolutely no value at all. Your card or a chip in your hand or your phone or your computer will have digits, just digits, of what's in your account. Now, most people don't understand that a central bank digital currency means that not only there's no tangible cash that you can spend because it's gone, but this system is programmable. It can program into your account what you can and cannot buy. In other words, if the central bank decides that meat is a bad thing and it's contributing to climate change, they can regulate that you can only purchase one hamburger a week, not two. When you try to buy your second one, it will not work. If you disobey or you voice an opinion that is contrary to those who worship at the altar of climate change, they can punish you by making sure that your account does not work past a 5-mile radius of your home. They can limit your travel. They can limit what you buy. They can even make it where you don't have a savings account in your digital currency. They can put reverse interest on there so that if you don't spend it, it dwindles away and you lose it. So if you want to know something that of all the things that are coming against this country that scares me the most, it's a central bank digital currency, because when that happens, your liberty and my liberty is gone. They will own you and they will dictate to you, and if you really disobey, they just shut your account off and you don't buy or sell. I've had people say to me, well, I got 2 cows and I got a big garden and I can survive. And I say, no, you can't. Because you have no mechanism to pay your property tax. And they will take it away from you. Last year I ran a bill. Actually, it was not my idea. It was Mike Carter's idea before he died. But I ran a bill and it passed. It said in Tennessee now, trustees in your county, if you want to pay your property tax forward, you can put as much money in an escrow account as you want to, and at least the state cannot take your property away until your money is exhausted. This whole system that Frank and I talked about gold bullion, and we fought for 7 years. It took us 7 years to get the tax off of gold bullion and precious metal bullion, rare coins and paper money in this state. Finally got that done last year. Took 7 years to get there, but the whole purpose of the bullion bills that he and I are both running, and we've got some others, or he does, and I've got an own separate bullion bill, and he does too, but that's because the wording is different to fit into, to fix 2 different things. But a state bank and those kind of things Frank's going to talk to you about. But the most important thing about having bullion, and we both have bills running this session that forces the treasurer in the state of Tennessee to purchase gold bullion. Now that's hugely important, because if you have a central bank digital currency, but the state of Tennessee has gold bullion, then push come to shove, the state of Tennessee can produce its own currency. And we can keep people alive in this state. There's another thing we're working on. I have approached the speaker 2 different times about this to ask him. There are about 26 or 27 what I call free states in the United States that have conservative legislatures. I have asked him to invite the speakers of those houses to Nashville and let's sit down and hammer out a compact of free states. That way, if Texas does it, South Dakota does it, Alabama, Mississippi does it, all these 26 states, push come to shove, we could have a currency system that's shared in all 26 of those states. You have to understand something else, because living up here in Hawkins County or Sullivan County, you might not understand this. There are 99 House seats in the State House. There's 33 in the Senate. Of those 99 House seats, Republicans have about 74 now, I think, after this last election. But you have to understand, it was a very eye-opening thing to me when I went to Nashville. I thought, gee whiz, boy, we can really get some serious stuff done here now with all these Republicans. Well, no. Out of those 74, probably about 30 are what you call conservative. What does that mean?
Righto.
It means that Frank and I don't have to fight Democrats. There aren't enough of them. We have to fight liberal-thinking Republicans. And so he has found the same thing that I found, and that is lots of Republicans are completely ignorant about the things we're talking about here today. Central bank digital currency scares me more than anything else. State sovereignty is huge. I want to tell you about one other bill, and then I'm going to let him talk for a minute. There's another bill that I'm running this session, and it's a bill of nullification. It sets a template so that when the federal government or the executive branch of government does an overreach unconstitutionally against the people of Tennessee, this template can set in motion the ability for the forces the Senate and forces the House to vote. Are we going to bow down and kiss the king's ring and sell out Tennessee people? Or are we going to say to the federal government, we're not doing that here? If we can get that bill, that's a pretty big deal, because you have to understand that most people don't know the Constitution anymore. Most people don't understand that the federal government actually has only about 18 things that they can mess around with. Absolutely everything else is left up to the power of the people in the states. So if we don't lay hold and enforce and hold to and defend the Constitution, we don't have a chance anymore. There is more evil coming against this nation than I have ever seen in any time in my life. Which brings up one other thing, if I can say it, and then I will shut up. I have found a perturbing thing to me. I don't know what your eschatology is, but I have seen in Tennessee this kind of thinking with church people. The thinking that they have somehow bundled together the fall of America and the rapture of the church. Somehow they have done that. I don't know how they did it, but they have done it. And what they have concluded then, of course, is they will say this to me: you can't stop Bible prophecy. America's got to fall. But don't worry about it. 3 days after she goes under, we're all going out of here. And I look at them and say, how in the world did you conclude that? Amen. And they'll say, well, the Bible prophesies it. Well, it does. But you've got to understand, almost all of the prophecy in the Old Testament is conditional. If you do this, I'll do this. If you do this, I'll do this. And the sad thing is, when you have that kind of thinking and you tie and bundle those things together, what it produces is a lethargy among Christian people. Half of them don't even vote. They don't get involved in politics. They don't write their senator or their representative. And why should they? We're all going out of here. Well, I want to tell you something. This nation is worth fighting for, and it's worth preserving.
I may just sit down here. How many of y'all have ever heard of Niceley? How many of you know why it was called Dixieland? Not many people know. But I'll tell you a story, and it ties in with what we're talking about. Back before the war between the states, the state of Louisiana had real strict banking laws. Everybody trusted the French banks. The French banks put out a $10 bill. It was English on one side, it was French on the other side. On the French side, it was big letters, said D-I-X. That's 10 in French, Dix. Well, the riverboat captains and everybody nicknamed them Dixies. And they were trusted. They trusted the bank. That's the main thing you gotta have, trust in your bank. And they became used everywhere in the South and up and down the riverboat captains used them. And when the old black gentleman wrote, he wished he was back down south in Dixieland, he was talking about the land where all the $10 bills, the Dixies, were floating around. Now, it amazes me that I just learned that about a year ago, and nobody knows why Dixie was called Dixie. But there's a black representative from Niceley, fine young man, and I asked him one day, I said, young man, do you know, his name is Dixie, Vincent Dixie. And I said, young man, do you know what a Dixie is? He said, yes, sir, it's a $10 bill. So anyway, what does that prove? That proves that one state with stable banking laws can issue a currency that's used in other states. So that's one thing people say, well, it won't work. It will work, it has worked, and it can work again. The other thing I want to tell you that's lay a little background is when America won the Revolution, England signed 13 peace treaties. They signed a peace treaty with every former colony. Virginia, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, all of them. So when the 13 states, which were really nations, when they got together and signed the Constitution, they delegated this power that Bud's talking about, these 18 enumerated powers, to this federal government. Well, when it first started, only 11 of them joined. So when George Washington was elected, North Carolina and Rhode Island were still independent nations, like France and Spain. So finally they said, well, it's a pretty good deal, so they signed up after about 2 years. So where am I going with this? If the federal government fails, Tennessee becomes a nation again. And at that point, we're going to have a gold and silver reserve. We're going to have our own currency. And we're probably going to have some military protection. We've got more National Guard units than any state in the nation, maybe except Texas. But we hope that doesn't happen. But just like Bud said, all this international stuff, the Federal Reserve, there's nothing federal about it. It's a private bank with a federal charter. It was mainly the Rothschilds and J.P. Morgan. I didn't realize later J.P. Morgan was out of England. It's all pretty much based out of London. It still is. And he said, well, it's a Federal Reserve. The president wants ahead of it. That means nothing. They're an international banksters. I call them banksters. But you've got to realize that first, and then everything starts making sense after that. Now, I just read a book called The Monster from Jekyll Island. And you need to read it. I've known about the book for a long time, but it's a big book, but it has summaries at the end of each chapter. So if you don't feel like reading a big book, just get it and read the summaries. And it's an eye-opener on how the Federal Reserve has got us into wars, caused the Great Depression, bubbled it up, kept us in a Great Depression, what should have been a 2-year recession. But if you read The Monster from Jekyll Island, that will lay the groundwork for why we are where we are. That's the group that's wanting this central bank digital currency. It's these international banksters. And they're not elected. We didn't vote for them. We didn't appoint them. I mean, who appointed Klaus Schwab? Anything? We didn't vote for him. What do they call it?
World
That
Economic
bank in Switzerland, the Bank of International Settlements. We don't owe them anything. But they come along pushing this central bank digital currency. And like Bud said, it's programmable. They can tell you that you can't eat country ham and ice cream. You're going to have to eat tofu and bugs. You know, it's crazy what they're talking about. Well, I think if it ever that, there would be a huge black market in America. But if the state, if we could get ahead of it, and like Bud said, they think we're crazy, old and crazy, but we're old and wise. There's a difference. I told my granddaughters yesterday at lunch, I said, the difference between smart and wise. I said, smart, knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wise is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. I tell people, smart people have smartphones, but wise people have dumb phones. Well, I've got a couple, 3 bills where Bud and I are working on. One of them is to make gold and silver legal tender in the state of Tennessee. Now, that's happened in some other states. And that's a start. Then you can pay your taxes with gold or silver, even if they went to this digital currency and said you got to pay it. If it's legal tender, they'd have to take it. And I think we get that done. The next one is we trying to get the treasurer to buy some gold and silver and put in the rainy day fund or the retirement fund. Now, we think he's agreed to buy about 20 million. We'd like to have 500 million. We've got about, in our retirement fund in Tennessee, all of y'all that work for the state or the teachers, we have about $70 million. We're about the best state in the nation as far as our retirement funds. But he's already lost $7 billion. I asked him today, it's down to $63 billion. And the treasurer's a smart man, he's wise. He told me the other day, he said, this movie we're watching in Washington is not going to have a happy ending. He knows that it won't. So we've got him now, after several years of talking to him, interested in buying some silver and gold. Silver and gold have never been worth nothing. Anyway. I told somebody, that's how you explain it to your kids. Said, 1960, Bud and I were young, we wear this time capsule. And Bud put 4 quarters in his time capsule, and I put a dollar bill in mine. But at that time, Bud's 4 quarters were about 4 gallons of gas, 4 loaves of bread, sold my paper dollar. Well, we dug them up last year, and Bud's 4 quarters will still buy 4 gallons of gas, still buy 4 loaves of bread. But my paper dollar, it won't buy half a gallon of gas, a third of a gallon of gas. So that, you got to figure out ways to explain it to your children and your grandchildren and your little neighbors, how things really work. Now, there's more people out here that's got silver quarters laid back and silver dimes than you think. I mean, there's a lot of them around. And I think if the central bank digital currency ever happened, you'd see a lot of those silver quarters come out of the stock roll and start floating around. But another bill we've got is for a state bank. Now, the state of North Dakota has had a state bank since 1919. It was founded just right after the Federal Reserve was founded, so they didn't have energy enough to come up and fight. Now, North Dakota has more small banks than any other state because the state bank supports the local banks. The local banks can deal with the Federal Reserve or they can deal with the state bank. The state puts all its money in the state bank. Counties can put it wherever they want to. You can put your money in the state bank, but you don't have checking, credit cards, or anything on the state bank. The state bank does not compete with these little banks. The Federal Reserve is slowly trying to put your state banks out of business, your little banks. Dodd-Franks, when they passed the Dodd-Franks, that really crippled your local banks. So there's no place in this digital currency picture for local banks and credit unions. So one thing we've got to do is get these local banks and little banks on board with this state bank. And the banks, believe it or not, they like our ability to take the gold, to tax off gold and silver, because they want to be able to sell gold and silver and when people want to buy it. So what other bills we got? Yeah. We got a state bank, we've got a money in deposit, we've got a
bullion, legal tender, and state purchase. So, and then you said, do you actually have a real number for the state bank account? Is that right?
I've got
It's
it.
been filed, but I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
Talk about the tokens, silver tokens, putting in
Yeah, it's interesting. Right over here at Greenville, there's a company called Artisan, ZN on the end of it, like zinc. It's the old mason jar, the zinc lids that they used to make. That's what they made, the zinc lids. Well, when the zinc lids went out of style, back about 1984, up until 1984, a penny was solid copper. Well, now then, that penny was about 3 or 4 cents. The new pennies since 1984 have been made out of zinc. Well, over here in Greenville, they make 7 billion zinc pennies a year. That's a big number, 7 billion. And then they coat them with copper. They send them to the mint and they stamp them. So we've talked to them about 3 different times now about them making a silver dollar with a Tennessee silver dollar. We may have to call it a token, or we may not be able to call it a dollar, but we can call it a Tennessee dollar token or something like that. And there's different sizes. And I'll explain this. I just figured this out the other day. You know, you've got some of these silver rounds are a Troy ounce. That's bigger than a regular ounce. But the old silver dollar, I'll tell you how a little history on that. Spain started making the old Spanish piece of 8, which was a silver dollar, in 1497. And they used it all through history. And during the Revolutionary War, the only thing that was really worth anything was a Spanish piece of 8. They called it a piece of 8 because they could divide it into 8 pieces. 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, a dollar, 8 bits. And up until recently, if you watch the stock on the stock market, they'd say, well, Ford's up 7 3/8. They've quit that now, but that hung on for just a few years ago. Well, when America decided to make a silver dollar back in the 1700s, they rounded up a bunch of old Spanish silver 8s and weighed them. Then averaged it out, and they averaged it out to 371 1/4 grains of silver. So that's what they made the American silver dollar, same as the old Spanish silver dollar. It just turns out, if you got old silver money, if you got $1.40 worth of old silver, it makes an ounce of silver. It doesn't matter if you got 4 quarters and 4 dimes, or silver dollar and 4 dimes, or 2 half dollars. It all comes out to 371 grains. So my argument is that's what Tennessee ought to do. We ought to if we make our silver token, we need to make it the same weight as the old Spanish piece of 8, our old silver dollar. It's a little smaller. It'd be easier to use in small transactions. And so that's the way we're kind of leaning. Now, Bud and I need votes. And the way you get votes is you ought to call representatives, senators. They don't have to be in your district. Email them. And the thing that amazes me is I've never heard a U.S. Congressman or a U.S. Senator even mention central bank digital currency. I don't know if they're afraid to mention it, they're scared, they don't talk about it, it's coming. We've got a House member from India, Dr. Kumar. He told me the other day that India came out and announced one day that their paper money was worthless. They have to turn it in and put it on their smartphone. So they're already doing it in India, they're already doing it in China, I think the Bahamas, a lot of African countries are already doing it. So it's not a conspiracy theory when the Federal Reserve announces that they're already got a pilot program going with the 4 big banks. So one other thing I want to clear up that took me a while to realize, these bitcoins and stable coins and all these things, they're decentralized. They are actually the enemy of the central bank digital currency. Digital currency's got to get rid of it. They've got to get rid of the bitcoins and stuff to really make this work, or people just be trading bitcoins. And I believe, I've not read this, but it makes sense that they built FTX up to fall, to try to demonize all the bitcoins. When the bitcoins are decentralized, the central bank digital currency is centralized and programmable. And I say things sometimes that makes people mad. A lot of these millennials can't handle real history. They want it sugar-coated, sterilized. Sometimes I social credit score will be real low, I'm sure. Bernadette, we'll take some questions.
This isn't on my list, but, and you might not have any advice, but for where we are right here now, do you have any advice of where people could trustworthy places to go to buy gold and silver? There's ads all over the place. How do you know you're getting a fair price, a fair product? Any advice on that?
Well, the place out in West Tennessee, I think it's called the Money Changer, and it's Franklin Sanders. And Franklin's been in business for 40 or 50 years. I would trust him completely. He can buy you junk silver. Junk silver is always quarters and dimes, half dollars. And you buy them basically for the silver that's in them traditionally. But now then, I think people buy them now just as a currency in case everything goes crazy. But, other than Franklin, I don't know that any of them are crooks. I mean, now there are some gold big bars out of China that they've put lead or something in the middle of it, put gold around. You have to watch that. But if you stick with the old silver coins and gold coins, you can recognize them. They've got a date on them, you tell what they are. If you've got a handful of silver quarters, a handful of regular quarters, and one silver quarter, and you pour it slowly from one hand to the other, you can hear that silver quarter clink. It'll clink a little bit for the rest of it. But that's Franklin Sanders. He's out in West Tennessee, and I think you go to the Money Changer. You can find him. I can give you his name.
Can I talk about ESG scoring for just a second? You've probably heard a lot about that ESG scoring. I got a bill to eliminate that and outlaw it in the state of Tennessee coming up this session. E stands for environmental, S stands for social, and G stands for governance. Now, right now, it's focused on mostly investments, particularly out of BlackRock. And what they're doing is they are discriminating against companies, and as far as their investment goes, if they don't have good scores, ESG scores. E standing for environmental. Of course, which means, of course, if you don't bow down to the idol of climate change, you get a poor score environmentally. And by the way, I didn't start out being a conspiracy type person. The federal government has made me that way. I did not begin this way. But what I see with climate change and that whole ball of wax, and I've worried about it for a long time, that the end result of this movement is to do away with private property. To make it so difficult on you that you cannot own it. It is the same old communist ploy that we have dealt with for 100 years. Move the masses into metropolitan areas and one-bedroom apartments that the state owns, and the elite and the state will own private property. Now, that to me, that's what I have always been afraid of. But if you get a poor score environmentally, and S is for social, if you don't have, in your little company, if you don't have a policy that deals with how many transgenders you're going to have in there and how many LGBTQ people you'll have in there, just like what Bernadette showed you in the state of Washington, you get a poor score. By the way, I tell people that I'm fat, but I identify as skinny, which makes me trans slender. And then governance is how you run your company to enforce these type of policies. Now, if you get a poor score and the bank is involved in this, then when you go down and you vary financially, you might be as stable as anybody. Pay your bills, pay your debts, you have a great financial score. But you want to go borrow money to expand your business and you have a poor ESG score. If the bank loans you money at all, it very well may loan you money at a 25 or 30% interest rate where somebody else will get it for 8.5% that has a good ESG score. Don't think for half a second that that will remain with just banking and investments. You let ESG fly and it will hold hands with a central bank digital currency, and it will dictate the kind of social score that can shut your account off. So that's just another one piece of what you're needing.
I'll give you a little good news. Both our Speaker of the House and Speaker of the Senate last year, we got to talking about BlackRock. Before anyone else would talk about BlackRock, they were talking about BlackRock. We asked our treasurer, we had about, out of, at that time, 70 billion invested, but only 30 million was in BlackRock. And since that time, they have unloaded all of BlackRock. They got rid of it. BlackRock, I read, it lost $2 trillion, and they're limited their withdrawal now. So we got out of it before they started limiting withdrawal.
I think we can go ahead and open it up to questions. If people have questions, Jack can go around with the little mic that he's got there.
I think you're trained set, not note to it so I can see what you're talking
Thank you so much. I can't believe there's anybody out there that is aware of our fears and our concerns. Really quickly, is this county aware, and is there a place that we can put money in escrow account to pay for property taxes ahead of time? Is that already in existence, or is that something that we need to continue to ask for?
No, that's already, that bill already passed. It passed last year. There are some trustees that are having a hard time getting online because they don't have the computer system to do it, but according to the organization that all trustees belong to, they are supposed to come along when they update their equipment to allow an escrow account for
Because we have
taxes.
asked in the past if we can pay our property taxes ahead of time, and they said no. So
Well, no, it's the law.
That's one of our greatest concerns.
Yeah, it is the law to do it, but there's a caveat in there to let them to come up to having the equipment to do it.
Thank you so much.
Senator, you mentioned the paying the property taxes the gentleman was just speaking about. What about income tax? If the federal government is not going to accept a Tennessee currency, how would somebody go about paying income tax?
I guess just don't make any money. Don't report it. See, there's income and there's reported income. I've got friends, old friends, that if you don't ever start paying it, they don't like it. But if you pay it the first time, they got your name, they come out and do it. I don't know a real good answer to that question. I really don't. Just when I tell people, when it comes to taxes, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So that's all.
That's right.
I'd like to ask a question about the local banks. What can we do, you asked for us to put pressure maybe, or even request with our local banks to get on board with you guys with the state bank and trying to get that going? What can we do in our local branches and our local banks to try and push them towards where you're headed?
I think that'd be great if you could talk to your local bank board or presidents, or explain it to the board, give them something to read. When I was at UT, and I don't brag about being at UT, but sometimes I wish I'd gone to a real university. My economics teacher down there, he had married a DuPont. And he said that there's no other industry that knew as little about what they were doing as bankers. And I think he's right. You ask these local bank presidents what the Federal Reserve does, and they'll say, well, they clear checks. They just clear it out for checks. And they don't really know. But if you read that book about the monsters from Devil Island, you'll believe the banks don't really know what's going on. It's scary. It explains every little recession and depression that we've had, how they handled it wrong. If they'd done the opposite, it would have been wrong. But just talk to your local bankers and tell them to get a hold of the lobbyists and association and tell them to study these things. You can't. I've found through the years, when you're dealing with the non give them too much, a lot of times they can't have it.
Gentlemen, I noticed that Google and Facebook, they have data centers here in Tennessee. Is there any way to deter tech companies from coming in, or is the money too great? I don't know behind the scenes like what they offer, or does the state even incentivize companies like that from coming? Can we prevent charging stations? My wife and I, we're from Silicon Valley. We escaped California. We're here, we're on the front lines, we're homesteading, and we know that's occupied territory. This is the front lines now. Is there any way, because we've seen what happens when it comes, like Tesla going to Texas, here in Texas, Tesla's even in Oklahoma. So how is there a way, and without like, I guess, we're slowing progress, but is there a way that we can eliminate that so that tech companies can, I'm scared. I go to airports and I see Amazon, you walk in, it's cashless, you just sign in, there's no cash, you walk out with their goodies and they charge you. My wife came from LA on a business trip, and LAX, power went out. They couldn't communicate to airplanes. They couldn't even flush the toilets because they're electric. Like, if this comes to Tennessee, there's no stopping. Is there any way to stop that or slow it, in the state of Tennessee?
I've heard that some states have an exit tax. That when you sell your house and leave, you have to pay like 1%. So I've toyed with the idea of having an entrance tax. I guess it's constitutional. If they have an exit tax, we could have an entrance. But some of our best supporters are these refugees from other states, just like you. How many of y'all moved in here in the last 5-10 years? See what I mean?
We know what we get. That's why we're here. Beautiful. Keep it that way.
We need the help. And if y'all get active, and you wouldn't be here today. And just, I don't mind good conservatives moving into Tennessee. That just makes our army bigger.
What Frank said is really, really important, and Burnett alluded to it too. All these bills that we have and bills that you're interested in, you can't afford to sit by and just let government run anymore. You can go on the Tennessee General Assembly website, and you look at Frank, you can pull him up, and you can look at every bill he's got. You can pull me up and look at every bill I got. And then you can track where that bill goes. Those bills get assigned to a standing committee. And you can then get that committee and look at every member that's on there and who they are, and it's got all their contact information. So when you come across a bill that's really important, that your liberty rests upon it, you need to look at who's going to hear that bill in that subcommittee, if it's going to be a subcommittee, and write those people an email, or write them a letter, or call them on the phone. And then when it goes out of the sub to the full committee, you do the same thing. When it goes on the House floor, you do the same thing. So that those people hear what your concern is and your support for this bill or a bill that you don't want. You do the same thing. But trust me, all the liberals do this regularly. I ran a bill 2 years ago or 3 years ago that said that you could not use police power to enforce executive orders in this state that dealt with 3 fundamental constitutional issues: the right to travel, the right to assemble, and the right to go to work. I got flaming hatred emails from hundreds and hundreds of left-thinking people, but not one peep out of conservative people. So that's very troubling, because that tells me that conservative Republican people, by and large, most of the time, are just silent. They're quiet. Well, the other side ain't quiet, and they're not silent, and they're connected, and they're unrelenting. So you need to get in the fight.
I just want to add, as a citizen activist who goes to capitals and talks to legislators, to give you a little bit of insight on what he's talking about. And we all know that anger motivates. That's why he heard it was a great bill. Conservatives loved it. But loving something often doesn't motivate you to call them and tell them, I love it, I support it, and that sort of thing. But if he had written a bad bill, you probably would have been dialing as fast as you could. We have to, as a group, as conservatives, we have to get vocal when we love something and support the guys who are doing it right and thank them when they run bills and be part of that. And I want to tell you about two bills last year that were surprised. They were run as a caption, and when the actual language of the bill emerged, surprised the committee. They were two bills that were pushing in an indirect way, but very blatantly, the Gardasil HPV vaccines. And Mama Bears immediately got activated in the state, and we sent out email campaigns and phone call campaigns, and there's this awesome woman named Gail, homeschool mom, like 5 kids. She was in the office of the sponsor.
Next door to mom.
Next door to your office. And the rep did not get reelected. He lost by a whole lot. But anyway, he would open his door and look in his office and he saw this mama bear there. And he tiptoed out. Now you think I'm small, she's little. And he was so afraid of her. And she's just a sweet, passionate, quiet, but strong-willed mama. And this legislator pulled both bills. So bad bills can be pulled, good bills can be passed. They do listen. I moved from Washington. You get wonderful input on good bills from individuals, but the legislature out there does not listen to the individual. They are so cowed. For the most part, there are some good ones out there. I don't want to dwell on Washington, but here it is so refreshing. You walk into the office and they want to know. I really think that you guys listen to the individual citizens more than the lobbyists. I get that genuine connection with a lot of these offices. Don't be afraid to go. Make a trip to Nashville. It could be great. If you're coming, text me. I'll walk you around, introduce you. It's great to be active, and we really can get her done. Last year, we got ivermectin legal, the only state Next question.
I would like to thank you guys for coming, and I just love the fact that you know what you know. That is really fantastic, and God bless you for that. But my question is this: the bill that you've already got passed says, and I've been waiting on this for a long time, but when I seen it come through, I was really happy. The gold and silver coins, it says coins, no tax, no sales tax. Does that include precious metals in general, of all types of bullion and precious metals? And then I have a follow-up just to add. We built a new Ace Hardware over at Tazewell, and we've been waiting for this moment. We're ready to open our silver gold dealership for silver coins to be available. They ordered, our dealer is a wholesaler in Florida, that we are ready to get started on that. We've been waiting for this for a long time.
Well, the bill was written to give tax exemption to precious metal bullion, which would be gold, palladium, silver, any precious metal bullion, but rare coins and paper money was included in that. So if you had gold jewelry you were selling, that wouldn't be tax exempt. But it should be written in the bill. I can't remember now, but it's the gold bullion itself used as a precious metal, like an investment or anything like that. When you purchase that, there will be no tax on it.
What I'm referring to is bars. You got a lot of silver bars that are not coinage. It's not legal tender, or what used to be legal tender. It's gold and silver bars.
No, you shouldn't pay tax on that.
Thank you very much.
By the way, on this other, I want to say this before I got done. I don't want you to think I'm dumping on my fellow Republicans, okay? I'm just telling you that there are Republicans that are not as conservative as Frank and I. Now, are they heck of a nice people? Yeah, they're nice people. They're good folks, and I get along with them good. And we argue a whole lot. So please don't think I'm just hammering on fellow Republicans to be doing it. There was one other thing. 40 years ago, I read a book by a guy named Des Griffin. It was called The Fourth Reich of the Rich. And in there was a quote from Henry Kissinger, and this is what he said. He said, if you want to control people, you control food. If you want to control nations and continents, you control oil. If you want to control the world, you control money. And that's what you're dealing with right now.
So I'm from Texas. I've just recently started the migration over here to Tennessee, and I've been very impressed by the community and the people. I'm actually a Texian. I'm part of the Texas Republic, and we've been coining our own money for quite some time. You know, we've established ourselves, been recognized by our Supreme Court, and you've got the same movement taking place here in your state. Well, my question actually comes to a point. You guys have mentioned a lot of things about government and about how government should operate. But government's supposed to support the will of the people. And I think the problem that we're facing in this country actually comes down to not just state sovereignty, but individual sovereignty. And so I'm just curious because, you know, I read things like this Senate document number 43 that says the ultimate ownership of property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is by virtue of government, i.e. mere user. So I'm just not clear on what the bullion bank is going to do if we don't own property and we don't have control over our government because you're a corporation and you don't represent the best interests of the people. I'm not sure what the bullion bank's going to present to us that's different from the fiat currency that they already have if it's regulated by the state or the federal government. It seems kind of the same. So if you could maybe speak to that.
Well, I guess it goes back to what I said about when Bud and I there was time capsules back in 1960. You know, the Civil War had the same buying power that it had. And the fiat currency has been debased to practically worthless. And we're going toward a great, what they call a great currency reset. We've had them before. We had one in 1971 when we decoupled completely from gold back in 33 when President Roosevelt confiscated all the gold. My dad was 33 years old, and they came around and confiscated all the gold coins. At that time, 1 ounce of gold was worth $20. So he confiscated all that gold and gave you $20 for your gold piece. As soon as he got all the gold, he said gold was worth $35. Well, gold didn't go up. Gold stayed the same. Your dollar lost 65%. That was a currency reset. So it's hard for them they can't do all this stuff if we got a currency that's backed with gold silver, like the old Dixie. You gotta have trust. You gotta have a bank and a government that you can trust. And, you know, hopefully we can do that. People trust Tennessee right now. Tennessee has a good reputation. We've got a good brand right now. Look, all y'all coming to Tennessee, you didn't go to Kentucky. Kentucky's just like us except they're bankrupt. I read an article the other day that said we had a $7.4 billion surplus. Now how did we get that surplus? In 1912, when we took over, the Republicans took over, the Democrats had run this state for 150 years. Ever since the Civil War, Democrats had run this state. Well, they didn't do a bad job. When we took over, we were in good shape. But they would increase taxes every year on something. Your hunting license, your marriage license, it's something. They couldn't keep and raise taxes. Well, when we took over, we invited Art Laffer, who was Reagan's economist, the Laffer curve guy, and he told us, he said, if you will eliminate the inheritance tax and the gift tax, within 2 or 3 years, you'll have a huge surplus. Well, we didn't know if it'd work or not, but we thought it would, so we tried it, and it worked. We had $1 million surplus in about 3 or 4 years. Then we abolished the Hall's income tax. Then we abolished the professional tax. We cut the tax on food. We cut the price of your carry permits down to pennies a day. We just, since January, anything you buy from the farm is tax-free. except the pickup truck. I tried to get pickup truck. But everything else you buy for the farm is tax-free. So people trust us. You got to do what you say you're going to do, and even on little things, or the people don't trust you. They trusted the old Dixie. They trust Tennessee government right now, and it all goes back, I think, to distrust. I don't know if I answered the question off.
No, that's okay. We can talk afterwards. It's all right.
Well,
I like this.
there's lots of questions that I don't have to answer to. Yours may be one of them. I don't know.
That's not unusual.
I'm Bob the Plumber from Whitetown TV, and the book that you're talking about is The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah, the creature, yeah.
Yeah, and it's by G. Edward Griffin. You mentioned another Griffin author, but I have several signed copies of that book, and anybody here that would like to get one for free, from me anyway, if you'll make a nice donation to both of these gentlemen, put your name on this piece of paper and I'll mail it to you. I don't know how many I got, but I've got at least 3 or 4. So thank you very much. Praise the Lord.
You're right. It's the creature from Jekyll Island, not the monster. And go look at something else on that. G. Edward Griffin wrote that book.
Oh, he's a very good friend of mine, by the way. I forgot to mention that.
Pardon?
He's a very good friend of mine.
Is that right? Well, he's 90. I think he's 90 years old.
And he signed those books on his 90th birthday at his Red Pill Expo in Lafayette, Louisiana. Amen.
Well, he watched an interview I did with a lady by the name of Catherine Austin Fitz. And after he watched that interview, he called Catherine and said, I'm encouraged. Said, I may just have my Red Pill Expo in Nashville this year. And if he does, I'd like for Niceley to come say a few words. Well, just for G. Edward Griffin to mention my name was a great honor. But if he has his Red Pill Expo in Nashville, we all want to go down there.
Oh, amen. Amen. He's real sick. He was poisoned in Lafayette. He was poisoned, and when he was in the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning, the nurse came in and tried to give him remdesivir. 3 nights in a row, they tried to murder that man. That's right. Yeah, praise God. He's still here.
Well, this Catherine Austin Fitz has had 3 attempts on her life. She lives half the time in the Netherlands. But remember that name, Catherine Solari, S-O-L-A-R-I, the Solari Report. You will really, she's probably the smartest person in the world.
Gentleman, Bernadette mentioned bad taxes, and Senator, you were just talking about the Democrats raising taxes over and over. This may be a little off topic, but it's been in the news here for the last couple of days that Tennessee is considering a per-mile road tax rather than a gas tax. Can you tell us what's going on there in Nashville?
No, all we did, I'm on the Transportation Committee, and this outfit out of Oregon, they've been pushing that for a long time. She made a presentation in the committee, and that's as far as it'll go. But everybody knows I've got all kinds of calls for it. I talked harshly against it at the time. I told them, I said, we used to be one nation under God. Now we're one nation under surveillance. They want to track us everywhere we go.
Right.
And that's not, I guarantee you that's not going anywhere. You can collect a penny, you can collect $1 of tax at the gas pump for less than a penny administrative cost. And these toll roads and this surveillance thing, it costs a quarter to collect $1. So that's not going anywhere. But it did get all over. If everything else would spread like that, you'd be amazed how many calls I've had over that thing. And some woman out of Oregon, and it was just kind of difficult. It's not fortunate.
Good.
Thank you. I want to say thank you for both of y'all for all that y'all do. And thank you for all of y'all for taking time out to be here, because this is what it's going to take to change this country and save our circumstances that we're in. And you know, when I look around, I notice there's not a lot of young people here. So we got to, like you were saying, Bud, we got to quit being silent. We got to speak out. And I don't know about some of y'all probably are like me. You got families, and I got a couple of kids that won't speak to me right now because I do voice my opinion. And so get back on that ESG score. Y'all are asking what you can do. I was checking around, I was with First Tennessee Bank. First Horizons is what it changed to here a while back. I got concerned because I've been at January 6th, I've been at Bill Barber's house, standing right in front of his house, talking to him personally, saying that I wanted something done about Hillary Clinton and Ben Johnson. I mean, right there. And so I was concerned because I'm going to be one of those that who gets his bank account shut off. So what I did was, me and my wife got on the phone, started calling around banks to try to find out who participates in ESG. Well, I found out that it's very hard to find a bank in East Tennessee that doesn't participate in ESG. So we ended up with Southeast Federal Credit Union. But what we did was we let those bankers know we don't support ESG and we're pulling our money out of that bank. So that's what you can do. And then, the other thing I'm just saying is, thank y'all. Somebody's got to replace y'all when y'all are not standing anymore. Somebody's got to replace me when I'm not standing anymore. And we got to quit being silent and wake our kids up.
While you get the microphone on that next guy, the way they will get these young people to put their money on their smartphone, they'll say, if you'll take your money out of the bank and put it to these digital dollars, we'll give you an extra $1,000. And so they'll just buy them. So we have to guard against that.
All right, my question was, not only in this state, but around the country, we're seeing businesses and institutions go cashless. And are we doing anything legislatively or can we to protect the use of cash? We get a lot of policymakers, auditoriums, civic centers are proudly announcing they're going cashless. And is there anything we can do to anchor our right to use physical cash and kind of hold off this electronic CBDC stuff?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Actually, last year I ran a bill that said any in-person transaction in the state of Tennessee, if cash is offered as legal tender, you have to take it. It says right on the daggone dollar bill that it's legal tender for all debts, private. But the first committee I got in front of, controlled by Republicans, in the subcommittee, and it failed. The bill failed. Their fear was something about, people worry about robbery, and so they don't want to have a bunch of cash around. Of course, you've worried about robbery the whole time you've been alive in my lifetime, if you had any money at all. But I know, came around to bite one of them. He was at a parking place. It might have been at the airport. And he was there, and he had cash, but his credit card wouldn't work. The smart card. Okay, yeah, his phone, it wouldn't work. So they wouldn't let him leave. He was kind of kidnapped there for a long time. So it kind of changed his mind about. I'm sure we'll probably run the bill again, but you might be surprised to know that there's about 25%, the last time I checked, of businesses in Tennessee that don't allow cash.
Right, and my concern with that is we're talking about maybe, possibly in the future needing to go to state currencies. And then at that point, we may not have the institutions set up to be able to handle that if everyone's already switched over and gone cashless.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. We get to that point because of the federal government's failure. Yeah, there's a whole lot of hurdles we're going to have to get over.
I've got a quick question. First, like everybody else, thank you for being here. Thank all of you up in the state capitol. This is not a banking issue that I've got a question with. What you really said, anger does a great deal. I would be willing to bet there's definitely Tennessee residents right now that are political prisoners in D.C. that are part of January 6th. Is there anything the state can do legislatively to help relieve some of the burden of those people and try to help them in some way?
I if they were guilty of a misdemeanor, they've had them locked up over a year. It's just it's like a third world country. And why our congressmen and senators don't raise hell about that, I don't know. But they're the ones to do it. I mean, there's not a lot we can do at the state level. We get a hold of your congressman and U.S. senators, we give them a call. And every now and then, it don't hurt to raise your voice with them. Now, they'll come in and their secretary say, well, I've had 20 calls today. Blah, 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 that's all right. If they come in and say, I've had 20 calls and half of them matter in hell, then that makes a difference. That raises it up a little more. So when you got something you're really concerned about and you're talking to the staff up there, they probably won't get to talk to the congressman or senator, but raise hell with the staff. And then they tell the congressman, say, they're mad. They're mad this time. You better start paying attention. So don't hold back on it. I mean, that's all I know what we can do.
Can I add something to that, sir?
He's very wise, but I want to say, remember, they're trying to label us all as violent. So be mad as hell, but as professional, ride the edge. Just try to leave the cuss words out. Don't make any threats, but be passionate, but be professional. Otherwise, don't give them an excuse to use all this other stuff against us. Sorry.
As usual, Martin, that's right. But talking to the staff is different from talking to the senator or the congressman a little bit sometimes. And if you're on the phone with somebody in Washington, but now if you're in Niceville, Bernadette's one of the best lobbyists that I've ever seen just walk in off the street and go to lobby. She did a great job last year, and I think we're all giving her a big hand.
So much earlier today. My comments kind of follow this gentleman here in blue about cash, because cash works so well for us. And when I heard about your all's measure with this financial kind of Tennessee currency, one of my concerns was we would be sort of compartmentalizing doing business just in the state, like if other states don't want to accept it. But I was glad to hear about that consortium of 26 states, I think you mentioned, that are interested in doing something like this. So I was just curious if they can be convinced to take the Tennessee currency and we can all trade together. That was one question I had. And then one other comment for you, the Bill 0726, the nullification bill, that's like the most beautiful bill I've ever heard of. I think it's sad that we have to have something like this that just says we have to follow the Constitution. But I guess that's where we are now. But as the Constitution relates to this, something about cash is it kind of preserves our privacy too. Because our financial transactions are a big part of who we are. And so it doesn't seem right to have government track all that. So I wonder if under the nullification bill, we can sort of make a Fourth Amendment argument to keep cash alive. So I'd love to keep cash alive, but also love to see if Tennessee has some currency if the other 26 states could take it.
Nullification, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison both said that nullification was legal back in 1797 and 1799. And they said if an issue is if they pass a bill that's unconstitutional, then the state can nullify it. And they asked Madison, well, who decides if it's unconstitutional? He said the people. Well, Bud and I are your representatives. We represent the people. So if we decide that something they did is unconstitutional, we've got every right to nullify it. Now, oddly enough, the dope smokers in Colorado and Washington State nullified federal law. They said, we're not going to do it. We're going to sell marijuana on the street. We don't care what the feds say. And the feds back down. So we can back the feds down. It's kind of ironic that they were the first ones to open to do it. They may not even know they did it. but they did it. And so once you do it once, you can do it again.
Gentlemen, I think we'd all agree that if you can't hold it, you don't own it. Now, we talked about a gold depository, which has not come up yet, and a Tennessee state currency. Whose gold is that currency going to be based on? The state's or ours? Because I'm not putting my gold in any depository and letting the state steal it from me.
Yeah, the way we're looking at it right now, it would be the state's gold. Last year, actually, it took me a long, I've been doing this, Frank too, for 6, 7 years trying to get a gold depository in the state of Tennessee. And of course, I don't know if you know how government works down there, but if you got a bill, there's a group of people called fiscal review, and they look at it to see if it's going to cost the state any money. If it costs the state any money, it will have a piece of paper that goes with your bill that's got a fiscal note on it. It says this will cost X amount of dollars. Well, what that means is that the first committee you go to is Finance Subcommittee, and if it's got money attached to it, it goes behind the budget right there. You don't run it through your committees yet. It goes behind the budget. What that means is the governor's budget comes out. We haggle around about that and vote and pass that. When it's finally passed, then the money that's left over is behind the budget money. And most of the time, it might have, let's just say for an example, it's got $1 million in it, but all these bills that are behind the budget, you got $50 million worth of requests. So then all the haggling and the fighting starts to see who gets their little bill funded and however much it was. So the whole point of all that is, where did I start off? I got so upset about that. Oh, the state gold depository, of course, is going to have a big, huge fiscal note on it. So what I did was I found, and Frank was running the other side of this bill, found a group of investors who wanted to invest in a gold depository in the state of Tennessee. The only thing they wanted in exchange was the ability to use the name Tennessee State Gold Depository. But they would fund it, they would run it, they would repair it, they would pay for the whole staff. The state of Tennessee taxpayers would not have one penny in it, but the state could store state gold bullion in it for nothing.
And then they controlled it as well by doing all that. They're not going to just do this out of the goodness of their heart. They control it in the sense of nobody breaking in to steal it, but the state now would be open to the public to put your gold in there too.
That ain't happening. Huh? They would get their money by renting space for all of us.
Yeah, you pay a fee to put it in there.
Private's way better than public.
Yeah,
if you let the state do it, you're screwing yourself. If you guys do it, you're doing yourselves a favor.
Well, that's my point. There's no way in the world I'd ever put my gold in a safe deposit box, let alone anywhere the state can touch it, because what's to prevent the state from going, hey, we've got $1 billion worth of gold, let's borrow against it, and 20 years from now, 30 years from now, our kids have the same problem on a state level that we have on a federal level right now.
My whole purpose was to establish a place where we could put state's gold in a safe place and use it not just for investment purposes, but hedges purposes also.
You don't have to put money in anyway. If you don't feel comfortable storing money in your bed, somebody doesn't feel that way. If they want to put it in a depository somewhere, they can do it. They don't have to do it. What about, just to give one last thing on kind of related to this, what about banking operations, putting money in there? Private banks.
One thing about the gold and silver, if we can pay our taxes, if we can get this bill passed where silver and gold is legal tender, then you can pay your taxes with silver. Say you want, or gold, say you want to pay, say gold, say silver is $20 an ounce. But if you want to buy it, you have to pay a premium over that. Right now, a big premium. But if you want to sell it, you take a discount. But if you paid your taxes in silver, you would get the spot. You wouldn't have to take the discount. The state would be getting it at spot, they wouldn't have to pay the premium. So the state could, it's a win-win for the state and the taxpayer. And the state could start developing a reserve that they could issue currency on. This is not going to happen overnight, but really there's several states. I've had legislators call me from Alabama. They actually came up to the capital. Louisiana, Arkansas, and Missouri that are all interested in this same thing. So what I want to do is try to, let's try before we get a compact on, get these guys together and say, hey, let's agree on what we're going to do. We need to all do the same thing. You say, well, if I've got the silver currency back in Tennessee, it would be worth different than this fiat currency. Of course it would. But all over the world, there's exchange rates. And Europeans are used to exchange rates. They go from Portugal to Spain, they don't have to swap their money. If we go to Europe, we've got to exchange our money. It varies every day. And so, it's not something you don't with a smartphone, you can just figure it out almost immediately. So Americans would have to get used to dealing with exchange rates a little bit, but nothing they cut down.
So, what'd you think about all that? Change your mind on anything maybe a little bit? Maybe that we're not out here all by ourselves. Maybe there are some people in politics who agree with us. You got to remember, these are state representatives. That's kind of a part-time job. So they are people just like you and me. They're not just milking the system forever and collecting a paycheck. I mean, they're still, Frank's a farmer. Bud is retired. Believe he's a retired cop. So, yeah, they still do the same stuff you and I do, and they're on our side. I would implore everybody watching this to contact your state representatives and ask them to get a hold of these two gentlemen and follow Tennessee's lead. Because, guys, if we don't do something like this, we are going to be stuck with this BS that is CBDC. And we're all going to be living in our little nice 15-minute cities and our 10 by 10 apartments, praying to God that the Democrats give us a little bit of food. If you want to protect your way of life, guys, you need to get involved. I can't do it all. I'm going to do as much as I can. I'm going to let you guys know everything you can, but you guys got to kind of find out some of this stuff on your own too. Please, please, please do something. Please at least get a hold of your state reps and say, we want to be part of the 26 free states. We want to save our way of life. Screw the 24 communist states. Let them go follow Klaus Schwab and become slaves. That's up to them. But me, that ain't ever happening. And for you, I hope to God it ain't either. If you live in one of those 24 communist states, please leave. Not the channel, the state. Have a good Sunday. Pinball out.